It all started at the beginning of the second year of school when he finally summoned all the courage in the world to ask his childhood friend and crush to go out with him. This girl named Miku had always been his friend since they were kids. However, before this confession, here was what happened a day before. So, that day, Yuyuta asked Miku if she was free so they could hang out as usual. However, Michiru told him she was hanging out with her friends, but she could make out time for his pathetic ask the following day. As the conversation was ongoing, two random ugly bozos noticed them talking. One of the bozos remarked that Michiru was a fine-ass chick and wondered what a hot chick was doing with the shrimp, hinting at Yuyuta. Yeah, but actually, we can't blame the dude because Michiru was an extremely hot chick, athletic, and highly intelligent. The true definition of the perfect school beauty. While our boy, on the other hand, was an ugly dwarf with 0 steez and a -1,000,000 aura. The only thing he was good at was crafting the perfect story that was better than J.K. Rowling's. The one person who ever listened to his stories was Michiru, and oftentimes she would praise him for being an exceptional storyteller. With that said, Michiru apologized for not being able to hang out with him, and just then, a friend of hers called her so they could start going. So, before leaving, she gave him the peace sign and said she would see him the next day while our boy just stood there awkwardly like a hopeless simp. Later on, as Yuyuta walked home, he thought about how this Michiru had been the driving force that powered his life. He could proudly call her his muse. But then, if he had to continue with life, he would have to put on his big boy pants and ask her to be his babe. On the other hand, Michiru stared at Yuyuta from inside the school as he was leaving, and noticing the serious expression on his face, she wondered if it was really urgent he hung out with her. Meanwhile, as Yuyuta walked home, the street was unusually noisy. The reason was that it had been announced by the electronic signboard that the popular web novel Digital Masters had been adapted into a blockbuster movie. So, everyone was eagerly heading to the cinema to see the movie. Those who couldn't were still excited nonetheless because the latest chapter of Digimas had just been released. This was the country's favorite web novel. Meanwhile, our boy wasn't caught up in the whole frenzy. He was only concerned about how he was going to make his much-needed confession the next day. While lost in thought, he accidentally bumped into an ugly dude who was pissed and made a move to beat his ass for being so absent-minded. But the dude's chick calmed him down, telling him that finding their way to the cinema was more important than picking a fight with a useless loser. However, Yuyuta couldn't shake off the thought that even such an ugly dude with a face that was more disgusting than expired milk had a girlfriend. He felt life was unfairly cooking his ass. He immediately began to have flashbacks about how Michiru had enjoyed listening to his stories. She had always cheered him on and praised his work. So, even if they didn't look like the perfect couple, Yuyuta was confident that with how sweet and kind-hearted Michiru was, she would take his feelings seriously. Back to the present, after Yuyuta had just confessed his feelings, upon hearing his awkward confession, Michiru adjusted her legs, stared at him angrily in surprise, and then slammed her hands, asking why she would ever want to consider such a request, leaving Yuyuta stunned. She told him she was busy and all she wanted to do was read the latest chapter of her favorite web novel, Digimas. Yuyuta then asked if she would consider reading the book later, and at least give him a listening ear. Hearing this, Michiru's anger boiled to the max. She slammed her hand on the desk, asking why he would ever tell her to read her favorite web novel later. Not even if her mother was in a coma would she stop reading this novel. Yuyuta immediately felt dejected because he had put his heart and soul into making this confession the perfect one. He tried talking to her again, but this girl was far gone, immersing herself completely in reading the novel. After reading a little, she stood up and said she was going home to continue the rest of the chapter. In response, the simp desperately tried to get her to listen, but Michiru dismissed him, saying she still had an episode of the Digimas anime to watch and couldn't waste time on such nonsense. Yuyuta told her to at least give a thought to his confession. But the bitch turned her back to him and said nothing would still change because, for now, her heart belonged to Digimas, and his worthless virgin ass didn't stand a chance.
Damn!
In response, Yuyuta demanded she stop comparing him to a non-living thing because he was real and clappable. Michiru then turned, giving him a demeaning look, asking if he was seriously trying to compare his pathetic turtle face to the brilliance of the great author of Digimas. After which, she turned angrily towards the direction of the door and warned him never to compare his Smeagol appearance with the great Kamamatsu. As those words left her mouth, Yuyuta was stunned and asked, with disbelief, if she hadn't realized all this time that he was actually Kamamatsu, the author of Digimas. In response, Mikiru yelled at him, calling him a delusional, desperate, ugly-ass liar, and then said there was no way in hell he was the author. Yuyuta tried convincing her, but she shut him down immediately and asked him to stop. She told him that even though they were friends, she would never forgive him if he insulted her favorite author one last time. At that moment, Yuyuta was frozen in space because he never believed that all the times she had praised Digimus in front of him, she was clueless that he was the author. So, he quickly dove into his bag and pulled out his laptop, showing her the manuscript of the latest chapter as proof. Even so, Mikiru told him it was a copy and paste work, and said she never believed he could go so low to do that just to make her accept his bull crap story. As she was about to leave, Yuyuta desperately grabbed her hands, begging her to believe him, but she smacked his scrawny hands and then yelled at him to cut it out already. She told him no matter how hard he tried to convince her, she would never believe, even in her wildest dream, that his pathetic short self was a best-selling author. After saying that, Mikiru told him cruelly that Kamamatsu would surely be 10 times smarter and more handsome than the cringe that was before her very eyes. After saying those words, she stormed out of the classroom, declaring that she would never forgive Yuyuta for mocking her favorite author, and demanded that he never speak to her again. At that point, Yuyuta felt dejected and miserable because the reason he was able to write such a big hit was all because of Mikiru's praise. He cried like a sissy because it hurt to finally realize that all her praises were for Digimus and not for him. Walking home from school that day, Yuyuta was heartbroken and frustrated. He couldn't get the image of Mikiru calling him a clown out of his head. With that, he took hold of his phone, and while staring at the latest chapter he just uploaded, he knew he wouldn't be able to continue writing. He might as well quit since his reason for writing was gone. He had no other reason to continue writing. With that, he typed the words, "I'm done, I quit, I'm retired." At that moment, the entire country was in a state of pandemonium as they couldn't believe that their most loved author, Kamamatsu, was retiring. For Yuyuta, however, he tried to smile because even though this was the end of Digimus, the novel had managed to be adapted into an anime and movie. So, it was indeed good enough. Suddenly, his phone rang, and it turned out to be his editor. As he picked up the call, all he could hear were rantings on the other end before the caller eventually declared they were coming over to his house. On getting home, his mother and sister unexpectedly lunged at him, demanding to know what the retirement post was all about. They asked if it was because he was getting bullied. But Yuyuta assured them he was fine and was not bullied. With that settled, they calmly demanded to know why he had made the sudden decision to quit writing. Yuyuta simply replied, telling them he had sadly lost the motivation to write. Hearing this, his sister, Yutako, started to throw tantrums, saying she would die if she couldn't read Digimus anymore. However, his mother gently pulled his enormous head to her chest balloons, patting it softly as she assured him that while she cherished his work, she loved him 1,000,000 times more. Yutako joined the embrace, and together, they promised to support his decision to stop writing. Suddenly, the door burst open, and his father rushed at him with tears in his eyes, demanding to know why he had given up. Apparently, if Yuyuta quit writing, then his father, who was the vice editor-in-chief, might get fired. His father mentioned that Yuyuta was his company treasure and begged him not to retire. But then Yuyuta's mom immediately grabbed him by the collar and ordered him to shut his worthless, filthy mouth and behave like a man for once in his pathetic existence. While this commotion was happening in the house, a bike pulled up just outside. The biker removed the helmet, and it turned out to be a hot baddie named Dara, who walked straight into the house and yelled at his father to leave Yuyuta alone. Seeing the hot stuff, Yuyuta was shocked, but Dara ordered him to hop on the bike immediately. Before Yuyuta could ask what was happening, Dara grabbed his hand, pulled him outside, and casually informed his parents that she would borrow him for a while. She turned to Yuyuta's father and told him that the company didn't trust him enough to handle the situation. Dara then handed Yuyuta a helmet and a jacket. After he put them on, she commanded him to hold onto her waist tightly. Hearing this, Yuyuta became nervous because he was a sore loser who had never touched a girl in his life. However, he managed to hold on to her jacket slightly, and with that, they zoomed off. Being so close to Dara on the bike, he could perceive the pleasant smell of her hair. Even though he shouldn't be turned on because his neutered eggplant just got rejected, somehow, he didn't feel so terribly anymore. Soon after, they arrived at a cafeteria, and Dara explained that it was the only place she could secure a reservation on such short notice. On entering the cafeteria, Yuyuta observed that the place was awkwardly empty, and then asked why they were the only ones there. Dara replied that she had booked the whole place for them alone because she needed to talk to him privately. She sat down at a table filled with food and then asked him to eat as much as he wanted. Just then, Yuyuta noticed that the table was filled with mostly meat and asked why. In response, Dara told him that according to her family motto, eating meat was the perfect solution for a depressed soul. She then tasted the meat and commented on how good the meat tasted even without adding the sauce. However, at that moment, she noticed that Yuyuta had barely touched his plate, hardly taking a single bite. She asked him what the matter was, and then cheekily remarked if a girl had broken his heart. Yuyuta immediately had a spit take at hearing this, so she figured she might have hit the bull's eyes at first shot. She asked him how it was possible for him to get his heart broken since he was a miserable loner who hardly went out with anyone. Yuyuta replied, telling her that the feeling was one-sided. With that, she asked if he wanted to talk about it. Honestly, Yuyuta hated anyone who pried in his business, considering the fact that this was even an embarrassing one at that. But seeing that Dara was a mature woman who seemed to have plenty of experience in breaking Sim's heart, Yuyuta decided to let down his guard this time. So, after explaining the issue of his childhood crush rejecting him, Yuyuta was shocked when Dara calmly smiled and told him she was glad. She mentioned that she was glad because, at the very least, it wasn't the stress of the work or the characters that made him quit writing. In response, Yuyuta told her he didn't have any reason to want to write anymore. Dara, however, pointed out that while it was true every writer needed a muse, what mattered even more was a writer's responsibility to their characters and the duty to see the story through to its conclusion. She told him that she wasn't saying this simply because she was his managing editor. On the contrary, she was saying it as a fan who had fallen in love with his characters. She then showed him Yuyuta her phone and then informed him that he had made the news. Yuyuta grabbed a hold of the phone, and while scrolling, he realized that just a few hours after he had posted his retirement, the post had gotten 60,000 replies begging him not to retire. He was almost in tears when he saw the massive love he was receiving from social media and how his large number of fans loved the characters he breathed to life. This hit him like an arrow straight to his heart because Digimus was supposed to be his child, and the world can't wait to see this child grow. In light of this new revelation, Yuyuta figured it would be irresponsible for him to leave his readers hanging and betray their trust just because of one stupid hoeing girl. Even though he loved it when Miku praised him, our boy finally put his brain cells to work and realized that, in the end, he kept writing because he loved creating stories. With a new resolve, Yuyuta told Dara that his mind was made up and that he would continue writing for the readers who loved his work and the characters who lived in it. He then thanked Dara for taking away the simp web that blinded his eyes and then pointed out the need to retract his statement. With that, he retracted his statement and was ready to start writing again with renewed motivation. Elsewhere, the heartless bitch, Michiru, was delighted and relieved at seeing on her phone that her favorite author was back and better. At the same time, chicks all over the world were excited that Digimus wasn't cancelled after all. Hours later, after leaving the restaurant with Dara, who was entirely wasted from drinking too much wine due to excitement overload, they decided to board the train. While sitting inside the train, Dara showed Yuyuta just how many comments his retirement retraction post had made, which doubled the number of comments his initial retirement post did. Seeing this, Yuyuta was touched because, over the years, he never thought he was loved this much. Dara then mentioned that she was also one of the millions of people who loved him deeply. Hearing this, Yuyuta was both shocked and embarrassed, so he replied that the love she was referring to must be for his work. In response, Dara told him she was glad she had managed to achieve something and took a major load off her shoulders. She further explained that in this age of Amazon and Kindle, where authors could publish their work independently, it almost seemed like editors were no longer necessary. However, she assured Yuyuta that she was very useful to his work because, apart from being his editor, she remained the #1 fan of his work. Seeing her in this vulnerable state, Yuyuta couldn't help but notice that she looked even more beautiful when she was exposed and unguarded. Still in her feelings, Dara pointed out that her job was to understand him the most and working with him had been the best thing in her entire life. She told him she would love to be his partner for life, not just to partner with him in Digimus, but as a partner in everything. This statement nearly knocked Yuyuta's brain off his skull, and he felt totally embarrassed. However, he was glad she understood and supported him. At those words, Dara smiled excitedly but remarked that she felt jealous of Miku, who he had based his entire work solely on her praises and motivation. She added that any girl in the world would have their floodgates open just by being an inspiration to a bestseller. Hearing this, Yuyuta felt sad as he thought about how Mikiru had refused to believe he was Kamamatsu. Suddenly, Deru rested her head on his shoulders, which nearly sent Yuyuta to an early grave out of mere shock. What shocked him even more was when she asked if he would love to date her. Without hesitation, she placed her hands on his skinny thighs and leaned so uncomfortably close, and our boy climaxed from all things. She then asked if he knew the process of plot development and then began to rub her melons on his shoulders. At that point, Yuyuta didn't understand what the heck was going on with the girl. It didn't end there. Dara then revealed that the reason she hadn't shown him how much she wanted him before was because she had known he was interested in someone else. But now that the threat was gone, there was nothing holding her back. She gave him a cherry kiss on his cheeks and told him he was cute. And just then, Yuyuta almost shat ice blocks just from getting his first kiss on his cheeks. Some random ugly losers on the train began to take a video of the steamy scene going on, while others demanded they get a room already. Totally embarrassed, Yuyuta stood up faster than my dad left me and informed Dara that he had arrived at his bus stop and then immediately bolted out of the train. However, Dara couldn't help but watch him leave, gripping her short skirt with a flooded peach and then waving him goodbye. While walking home, Yuyuta assumed it must have been because Dara was drunk, and that was why she was acting so thirsty. Nevertheless, her motivation, support from his family, and the entire love he had received from his fans had given him the much-needed motivation to get home and write the damn next chapter. The following morning, Yuyuta woke exhausted, only to find Yutako sitting on his bed sobbing. He asked what the matter was, and she told him that she immediately became emotional after reading the latest chapter he had posted the night before. She informed him that even though he had posted late at night, the chapter had gotten a massive number of views. With so much excitement in her heart, she embraced him and then thanked him for blessing his fans with a new chapter. After getting dressed for school, Yuyuta headed downstairs for breakfast with the family. It was then that his worthless excuse of a father tackled him into a hug, thanking him for not quitting and getting his ass fired. The deadbeat father, while still hugging him, thanked him for being the family's financial savior. But Yuyuta's mom immediately separated the clinging octopus from her son before he squashed Yuyuta's fragile bones. She then asked the useless man to get his act together and provide for his family so that even if Yuyuta decided to quit writing, he could still be a provider. In response, the spineless old dweeb told her that anytime Yuyuta decided to quit writing, the family was as good as dead. However, the mother ignored the idiot and then hugged Yuyuta, assuring him that if he ever wanted to quit, the family would support his decision. She also urged him to take his studies seriously and encouraged him to live a normal life, assuring him not to worry about the family's finances. However, Yuyuta assured her that he was still passionate about writing and he wasn't going to quit anytime soon. Shortly, while having breakfast, they watched the news on TV about the retirement and retracement of the best-selling author that has caused passionate reactions all over the world. Hearing this, Yuyuta almost had a spit take because he had never expected his little post to gain so much publicity. His freak of a father then shouted like a crazy salesman, informing Yuyuta that Digimus was a massive franchise that had sold a crazy number of printed copies and anime Blu-ray. The old man also mentioned that the movie alone generated about $50 billion at the box office. After that, his father pointed out that there was going to be a party to celebrate and commemorate the $50 billion milestone. After saying that, he quickly rummaged through his bag and showed Yuyuta the invite to the party, shocking him. According to the invite, the party would be held at a luxurious 5-star hotel next to the Metropolitan Government Building. The old man also revealed an even more impressive shocker, stating that the production team would be booking the entire hotel for the event, instantly blowing everyone's mind. Following this, he asked Yuyuta if he would be attending the party. Yuyuta then thought deeply about the request. Even though he was trying to hide his identity from the general public, the bigger reason was that, initially, the moron had assumed that being around girls was like cheating on Mikiru. But with the ugly bitch out of the picture, it was time to have fun. With that, he told his father he would be attending the party as this would help him get over Mikiru for good. So, his father assured him that he was going to inform the crew about his coming. The old man also pointed out that Yuyuta would also get the privilege to see the super famous, super beautiful voice actress, Yuri, along with the rest of the cast at the party. That moment, Yuyuta instantly remembered that he had heard Yuri's amazing voice in the anime audition, and it had a deep, lasting impression on him. On the other hand, Yutako quickly googled Yuri's name, and when the search results showed, she was shocked to see that Yuri was a drop-dead gorgeous. For Yuyuta, however, this party would mark the beginning of a new chapter in his life. On the day of the Digima's party, our boy and his father arrived at the venue dressed in a new suit, like James Bond's rip-off. On getting inside the hotel, the clueless morons immediately got lost and couldn't find the exact hall for the event. So, his old man instructed him to wait while he asked for directions. 20 minutes had passed, and the old man was nowhere to be found. At this point, Yuyuta believed the old man had abandoned him just as your hairline abandoned you. As he was planning to find his way, he heard a sweet voice asking if he was stranded. He turned around and saw the most beautiful girl in all of manga history, and his DNA abandoned him also. The pretty girl asked if he was at the hotel for the Digima party, to which he stammered yes. She immediately noticed how tense Yuyuta was, so she asked him to chill since it seemed they should probably be the same age. She then asked if he was lost, to which Yuyuta responded yes. Yuyuta told her that his father had left to seek directions and had yet to return. In response, she revealed she was also lost and then asked if she could stay with him until his dad returned. Yuyuta nervously agreed, and as they waited, Yuyuta thought of several conversation starters, but he was too anxious to use any. After several minutes of awkward silence, the girl finally broke it by asking what his name was. Nervous as hell, Yuyuta introduced himself, after which the girl also introduced herself as Yuri. She then asked what relationship he had with Digimas to be at the party. That moment, Yuyuta considered telling her he was the freaking author of the bestseller, but he assumed the girl might not believe him anyways. However, before he could answer, Yuri asked him not to bother since the question was quite personal. Finally, after several weird moments, our boy spoke, asking if she was a fan of Digima, the web novel. Excitedly, Yuri exclaimed that she was the biggest fan ever and had been a fan ever since the first chapter was posted. Upon hearing this, Yuyuta was stunned because he never believed such a hot beauty would be his biggest fan. So, he inquired as to what she liked most about the novel. Yuri replied, telling him it was a long list. She explained that she was in love with the charming characters, the protagonist, and then went on to list several other things. Hearing all this, Yuyuta could tell that the girl was a die-hard otaku. He blushed because seeing such a hardcore fan apart from his family members meant a lot to him. With that, he told her he was glad to know she was a fan. But then it hit him. He was supposed to be pretending to be a fan, too. So, he rephrased his statement and told her the author would be delighted to have such a passionate fan. With that said, they ended up talking about Digimas for a while, as if they had known each other for years. After talking for hours, Yuri realized Yuyuta knew more about Digimas than she did and was happy to have found a die-hard fan like her. She told him she had never met anyone with whom she could open up about her love for Digimas and was happy she had lost her way and eventually met Yuyuta. Following that, Yuri revealed that it was because of fans like him that she gave a voiceover for the female lead actress in the anime. Hearing this, Yuyuta was stunned, and that was when he recalled his father talking about a certain beautiful voice actress. With that, he froze in shock to realize that Yuri was indeed the super beautiful, super popular voice actress his sister and father had talked about. Yuyuta was impressed that she was quite humble for someone so popular and couldn't help but ponder on the fact that he just had a casual conversation with a celebrity. On the other hand, Yuri then revealed that when the anime was announced, she had to practice day and night for her voice to be worthy of one of Sir Kamamatsu's characters. Hearing her call him Sir creeped Yuyuta out. However, Yuri mentioned that it would be rude to address Kamamatsu without showing some respect. After this, Yuri asked for his contact info, and Yuyuta immediately aged 10 years after hearing this request. He shook his head in utter disbelief because he had never thought an actual girl would like him for his disgusting face rather than for being an author. He then asked why she needed his contact information, and Yuri explained that she would love to chat with him more about Digimas and that she felt he was a great guy. Yuyuta, on the other hand, still couldn't wrap his head around the fact that the girl was really interested in him. However, he told her he would love to chat with her and then gave her his contact info. Just then, his fugly-looking father, who stranded him, returned and then apologized for keeping the author himself waiting. That moment, Yuri was shocked when she heard the weird old man call Yuyuta author and wondered if she heard right. At the same time, the useless disappointment of a father, on seeing Yuri, was awestruck and began to act like a fanboy, asking for her autograph. However, Yuri was still concerned about the author's thing she just heard. So, she asked Yuyuta if he was truly Kamamatsu. In response, Yuyuta shyly told her yes, guilty as charged, and the girl fainted on the spot. They immediately tried reviving her, but her spirit was almost leaving for Nirvana. Meanwhile, at the lounge of the hotel, another hot blondie named Alyssa was walking to the event center when she accidentally heard someone mention Kamamatsu and felt something was just not right. In the next scene, Yuri was taken to the first aid room by Yuyuta's dad, while Yuta was led to the event hall by one of the ushers. Before leaving, Yuyuta's dad informed him that he would be called on stage as one of the surprise guests, shocking him. Several hours later, the party commenced, and the whole place was packed with guests and journalists. Our boy, however, was backstage with the random usher, nervously waiting to be called on stage as a special guest. As he looked out at the audience and saw everyone dressed in fancy clothes, a wave of stage fright hit him immediately. Shortly, the franchise director, Makoto, stepped on stage to address the audience. He said he would skip the lengthy formalities and go right into business. Makoto then gave a boring lecture about the success of Digima and how the hard work of the team had brought it to fruition. He raised his wine glass, saying the party was all about celebrating their hard work. After this, Makoto mentioned that he would bring a special guest to the stage. Upon hearing this, Yuyuta almost had a high PB because he assumed the special guest was him. However, he was shot in the head when Makoto called in Alyssa, and the crowd went wild with applause. Alyssa walked onto the stage, and seeing her, Yuyuta was mesmerized because he recognized Alyssa as the famous artist who sang the opening song for Digima's anime. What caught his attention most was her hourglass shape that could easily fit for a supermodel. At that moment, Alyssa sang the opening song and thrilled the audience with her amazing voice. After she was done, she bowed her head in appreciation, while the star-struck audience couldn't get enough of the amazing performance. Following Alyssa's wonder performance, Makoto announced to the audience that they had another very special guest in their midst. Yuyuta immediately became tensed, while the nosy usher, noticing how tensed he was, pushed him right onto the stage. As Yuyuta walked onto the stage, everyone wondered who the heck the ugly kid was. However, at that moment, Makoto smacked his back and then announced him as the creator of Digima, leaving the entire crowd in total disbelief that the legendary Kamamatsu was just a youngin and an ugly one at that. Nevertheless, our boy stood awkwardly on the stage and bowed his head in greeting. Suddenly, Alyssa walked back to the stage, introduced herself, and then bowed to Yuyuta, saying she was deeply honored. At this point, Yuyuta was confused as to how he would react, but just then, he noticed drops of water on the floor and assumed it must be her floodgates leaking. Makoto also formally introduced Alyssa to Yuyuta as one of his biggest fans. Makoto then told Yuyuta that when Alyssa heard about the anime, she had called, offering to write the opening song. With that, Alyssa approached Yuyuta and shared how his spectacular story had deeply moved her, inspiring her to start writing songs. She suddenly grabbed his hands, throwing Yuyuta off balance, and told him that his work had changed her entire life. She added that she had always wanted to express her gratitude. Without hesitation, she immediately placed his hands on her heavenly pillows, asking if he could feel how fast her heart was beating due to how excited she was. But bro could feel more than her heart beating. He could also feel his wood rising.
What do you mean by that?
Following this, she told him that as a fellow creator, she respected him more than anyone in the world. In response, Yuyuta mentioned that he respected her also as an amazing singer. Upon hearing this, Alyssa was touched, so she embraced him out of the blues and pressed her bubbly chesticles against his lean chest. She pointed out that she had been dying to meet him for so long, and now that she had, she was the happiest woman in the world. Yuyuta also thanked her for loving his work and for even going the extra mile to write a song about it. He added that it was indeed an honor to have met someone as wonderful as her. Before he could finish his statement, Alyssa told him she loved him. Surprisingly, she grabbed his head, leaned closer, and gave Yuyuta his first ever saliva exchange that fried his brain cells completely. After that, she told him that he was everything she needed, that she loved him deeply, and that she wanted to go out with him. Meanwhile, Yuyuta still couldn't believe that his first lip clapping was given to him freely by a famous singer, and because of that, his lips would need to be laminated. Just then, Makoto got onto the stage and scolded Alyssa for acting too thirsty on stage and for giving the young man all kinds of wet dreams. While this was ongoing, Yuri suddenly woke up in the first aid room and demanded to know where Yuyuta was. Yuyuta's father explained that Yuyuta was at the party, but Yuri could feel her heart beating fast and excited at the mere mention of Yuyuta's name. The kiss shared between Alyssa and Yuyuta, and the unexpected confession became the highlight of the party. While everyone had refreshments, Yuyuta couldn't get the taste of the kiss off his lips. Suddenly, Alyssa approached him, bringing food and asking him to eat with her. Yuyuta told her she didn't have to go through all the trouble, but she insisted it was no trouble at all. Looking at the food, Yuyuta could tell it was the type of food a 5-star hotel would serve. Alyssa then took a bite, and from the expression on her face, Yuyuta could attest that she enjoyed every bit of it. However, Yuyuta couldn't help but continue to stare at her banging body, and the things he could do with her body. Suddenly, Alyssa took a slice of the meat and offered to feed him. Yuyuta immediately froze at the spot and told her he didn't deserve the honor of being fed by her. However, this made Alyssa sad, thinking Yuyuta didn't like her enough to beat her meat. So, she immediately gave him the puppy eyes, and before he knew it, the simp found himself unable to resist, his mouth opening on its own, ready to be fed. After which, she leaned close, telling him she felt hot on the inside and would need his long ice pack inside her. Suddenly, Yuri showed up apologizing for missing Yuyuta on stage. However, with the intense kissing that happened on stage, Yuyuta was glad she had actually missed it. Just then, Alyssa grabbed Yuyuta by the hands to mark her territory. Out of jealousy, she began to drag him in the opposite direction so they could taste the variety of foods. However, Yuyuta asked her to chill and then turned, demanding to have a conversation with Yurei. So Alyssa mentioned that she would also stay behind for the conversation. With a smile, Yuri thanked Yuyuta for creating Digimas, saying reading the novel had always filled her with courage. In a dramatic move, she moved towards Yuri, telling him that whenever she was down, his work had always cheered her back up, while Alyssa continued to stare at her with disdain. At that moment, Yuri immediately grabbed Yuyuta's hands, pointing out that she had always been waiting for the day to thank him and was glad she had come for the event. However, in an attempt to move even closer, she tripped and collapsed on Yuyuta's body, pressing her portable milk jugs against his chest. But she apologized almost immediately, saying she got too excited while Alyssa stood beside them, angrily boiling with intense jealousy. Out of sheer desperation, Alyssa quickly separated them and then yelled at Yuri to know her place. Alyssa then grabbed Yuyuta's arm again and then angrily demanded to know who Yuri was to her boyfriend. Hearing this, Yuyuta was shocked because he wasn't aware that he had actually become anyone's boyfriend. Yuri, on the other hand, asked Yuyuta if he was dating Alyssa, but he denied it faster than I could come up with a new joke. Upon hearing this, Yuri was relieved, but Alyssa was still overheating with jealousy, causing her head to almost explode. So, Alyssa grabbed Yuyuta by the hands and hugged him tightly to show she was in charge. However, as the party ended, hearing words of gratitude from so many people left a deep impression on Yuyuta. The party made him realize that Mikiru's approval wasn't all he needed to be an amazing writer. Meanwhile, as Mikiru scrolled through her phone to update herself on the latest gist buzzing at the moment, she was stunned when she stumbled upon a picture post of a random girl with the legendary Kamamatsu. Even with the sticker on Kamamatsu's face in the picture, she could tell it was Yuyuta because of the shape of his enormous head. She immediately recalled the way she had treated Yuyuta that day she rejected him. That day, while Mikiru was outside the school, she heard Yuyuta cry a river over the rejection. But she felt no remorse whatsoever because she would never forgive anyone for making a joke about Kamamatsu. Back in the present, Mikiru pondered on the fact that it could be possible that Yuyuta was Kamamatsu. But then again, she still could not believe it and decided to get ice cream instead to clear her head from all the thoughts. Shortly after getting her favorite strawberry-flavored cone from the supermarket, she happily headed home. That was when she spotted a black van pulled over at Yuyuta's crib, and Yuyuta's father stepped out of the van. It felt unusual, so she decided to peep what was happening. Just then, she noticed Yuyuta stepping out of the van, also dressed in the suit and tie, and wondered what the short goofy ass was doing wearing such a lame-ass tie. She wondered what kind of event he would have gone with such a horrendous fashion. However, she remembered that since childhood, Yuyuta had always been dressing like a clown. With that, Mikiru laughed because Kamamatsu would never have such a horrible fashion sense. But then, she remembered the Instagram post of Kamamatsu where he was wearing a similar suit and tie. Suddenly, her eyes widened in shock when she saw Alyssa and Yuri step out of the van. She almost had a nervous breakdown wondering what in the world two famous celebrities were doing in the Yuyuta's crib. However, she assumed they must be impersonators because there was no way in hell Yuyuta could be friends with two celebrities. Meanwhile, Yuyuta demanded to know why his dad had decided to bring the ladies home at such a late hour. The father then asked the chicks if they would love to come into the house, and they eagerly accepted, saying it was the perfect chance for them to meet with their fans. At the same time, Mikiru started to panic because she could recall Yuyuta's dad once mentioning that Yuyuta was important to their publishing company. Her head was almost about to explode as she continued to wonder why the celebrities were in Yuyuta's home. Meanwhile, Yuyuta's mom stepped out of the house, and Alyssa quickly introduced herself. After the introduction, she said she would love to marry Yuyuta, leaving everyone in total shock, including Mikiru. Then, Yuri introduced herself and said that she would also love to call her mother in the future. Hearing all this, Mikiru couldn't believe her ears and thought she must be dreaming or something, or probably must have been Icegate. At the same time, Yuyuta's mom then invited the girls into the house. She pointed out that if they were going to compete for the role of Yuyuta's wife, then it would be best if she judged both to find out who would be the best wife material. She told the chicks that they could also spend the night, which made the Magnum-craving girls really excited. Yuyuta's dad, on the other hand, couldn't contain his joy. So, he hugged Yuyuta and thanked him for having a harem filled with celebrities who would call him father-in-law and daddy. But on hearing this, Yuyuta's mother called him a creep and delivered a stunning punch to his midsection to flatten his balls. Meanwhile, Mikiru wobbled back home in utter sadness and confusion. On getting home, she threw the ice cream she had bought to the ground and dived right into bed, soaking her pillow in tears. She couldn't shake the thought that Alyssa and Yuri were getting married to Yuyuta and was still confused as to why the celebrities showed Yuyuta so much affection. She then had an idea. She decided to check the Insta post once more and compare the tie Kamamatsu wore with the one Yuyuta was putting on. When she did, she was dumbfounded to realize it was the same horrible tie. However, she decided to sleep in order to discard the memories of all that had happened that night. But then she couldn't get a single sleep as her mind was still racing with the thought that she might have made the greatest mistake of her life. The following day, Mikiru arrived at school looking like a ghost suffering an addiction from not sleeping all night. She knew she had to investigate and get definitive proof that Kamamatsu and Yuyuta were not the same person. However, the problem was how she would talk with Yuyuta since she had shut him up in the cruelest of ways. As she walked to class, she noticed a bunch of girls talking to a blonde idiot about the upcoming inter-high sport. However, as she walked past them, she wondered why the girls were giving so much attention to the ugly douche who was delusional and assumed he was the MVP of the school. When the dude stared at her, she had chills and thought even Yuyuta was 100 times better than the freak. However, the girls then noticed that the dude was staring at Mikiru, so they casually remarked that Mikiru wasn't open to dating anyone because she was married to Digimas. Even so, the blonde face was certain Mikiru was the perfect match for him and was determined to bag her. On the other hand, while standing before her locker, Mikiru heard a voice behind her, and she immediately assumed Nakatsugawa, the blonde dude, must have followed her. When she turned, she was shocked to find Yuyuta standing before her. For Mikiru, however, Digima had been a very special story to her. When her mom passed away, and her dad moved overseas for his job, reading Digima was the only thing that took her mind off the pain. The conflicts and the entire plot resonated with her like it had been written for her alone. She saw Kamamatsu as her savior, and that was the very reason she wouldn't stand letting anyone insult him, not even Yuyuta, her childhood friend. So that morning, when Yuyuta greeted her, she pretended to be still pissed and reminded the simp that they were not on talking terms. However, she told him he could quickly say whatever he wanted to if it was really urgent. But deep down, she was indeed glad Yuyuta had talked to her first, because it would make finding out the truth easy. Just then, Yuyuta asked if she had done the homework. On hearing this, Mikiru remembered that she had been so engrossed with the whole Yuyuta and Kamamatsu thingy that she had totally forgotten about doing her homework. So, she immediately began to leave. But as she was leaving, Yuyuta noticed she was looking pale, so he asked if she was fine and suggested she go see the nurse. But Mikiru yelled at him, saying she didn't need to see anyone, and then she walked away. While walking, she thought about getting solid proof that Yuyuta was truly Kamamatsu, which was the only way to get the stupid worries out of her head. Later that morning, while in class, Mikiru thought about investigating why Alyssa and Yuri were in Yuyuta's home earlier. So she indirectly asked Yuyuta where he had gone over the weekend, lying that one of her neighbors had seen him wearing a suit. Yuyuta replied, telling her it had to do with his dad's work. According to the IG post, Mikiru knew there was a Digima's party last weekend, so it might be very well possible that Yuyuta had met Alyssa and Yuri at the party. However, the problem was why the chicks were hanging out with his ugly ass. So, to get answers, she pressed further, asking Yuyuta if he made any friends at the party. In response, Yuyuta smiled, telling her he did, which made Mikiru super jealous that Yuyuta was really happy he had met Alyssa and Yuri. However, she told him it was fine, but deep down this girl was dying from intense jealousy. Noticing this, Yuyuta asked if she was upset, and without giving the question a second thought, Mikiru shouted that she was. Suddenly, Yuyuta's phone beeped. He was surprised because he assumed his phone was on silent. However, Mikiru was still reeking of jealousy because she had concluded the message Yuyuta received was surely from the celebrity chicks, since she knew his family members wouldn't message him during school hours. Meanwhile, Yuyuta responded to the message, all smiling, which aggravated Mikiru even more, as he was having so much fun chatting with the girls. She could see him laugh over the stupid message, which infuriated her. That instant, she couldn't contain the anger anymore, so she angrily stood up from her chair and snatched the phone from Yuyuta, leaving him confused as to what was wrong with the crazy bitch. But then, she immediately became embarrassed because she knew she was behaving like a total nutcase and a jealous ex, so she returned the phone to him. During recess, Mikiru stayed in the restroom, thinking about how seeing Yuyuta talk with other girls made her sad. Just then, a group of chicks stormed into the restroom, asking if she was interested in starting a beauty YouTube channel with them. They told her a beauty like her would definitely rack in the views. However, Mikiru told them to get their ugly, worthless face out of her sight. She knew she had to focus on Yuyuta for now and then walked out of the restroom. As she walked to the class, she noticed a bunch of ugly-ass bitches gossiping about Yuyuta, calling him a shrimp and loner that would probably die a virgin. Hearing those harsh roastings, Mikiru instantly got angry because, as Yuyuta's childhood friend, she felt she was the only one allowed to trash talk him. Shortly afterwards, in the next class, Mikiru pretended to be reading but casually took sneaking glances at Yuyuta, which he noticed. Suddenly, Yuyuta's phone vibrated. It was a message from Alyssa saying she was looking forward to their meeting that evening. Yuyuta smiled and responded that he was also looking forward to meeting her. Seeing this, Mikiru muttered to herself angrily, asking why the idiot was flirting with a girl in class over the phone. But that instant, Mikiru received a hard, brain-resetting knock from the teacher for talking in class. As the teacher walked past, Yuyuta asked if her brain was still in good condition, but it only made her pissed even more because it was all his fault. At the end of school that day, Yuyuta grabbed his bag and was about to leave when Mikiru called out to him. She asked if he was heading home, and Yuyuta replied, telling her he was, but he already had plans for the day. However, Mikiru inquired if they could walk home together, but in her mind she assumed it was all for the investigation. In response, Yuyuta told her it was fine and was glad that despite all that had happened, they could still walk home together. As they walked, Mikiru held onto his hands tightly and gave him an awkward stare, which made Yuyuta really uncomfortable. Will Mikiru discover that Yuyuta and Kamamatsu are one and the same person? Comment web novel. If you're eager to find out in our part 2. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. As always, thanks for watching.